Wow, there are many of you here. First, thanks so much for coming to this session. My name is Dennis Huang. I'm the Director of Interaction and Visual Design at Niantic. Yeah, it's funny standing here because a while ago I used to work at Google, and back then I used to like sneaking into GDC because I was so excited about the games industry and wanted to be part of the excitement. So I'm very grateful to be standing on stage today, getting to talk to you guys. Just a brief introduction. So my team at Niantic, we're responsible for most of the visual things that we do. So all across user experience and visual design, 3D art, 2D art, graphic design, you name it, anything that's kind of visual, our small crew has to handle. Our company is still pretty small. We were only recently founded in 2011 within Google. We're what's called an autonomous unit. So we're kind of like a startup that was being incubated within Google. But we spun out in 2015 near the end. But just to give you a quick overview, the company was founded by John Hanke, who is the founder of Keyhole, which became Google Earth, and later he oversaw all of the geo initiatives at Google, so Google Maps and Google Earth. Those are some of his well-known accomplishments. And the main goal for the company's founding, we had this pet peeve that was kind of common across the team. We wanted to change how people were interacting with their cell phones around us. So, you go to a beautiful beach or a beautiful hiking trail, and inevitably you see like a family that has children, and the parents are just looking at their phones, and the kids are like begging for attention, or the parents are just reading news or checking email. So Niantic, we looked at smartphones and said, hey, these are really powerful computing devices in virtually everyone's pockets. And guess what? They have tons of sensors, they have audio capability, they have a nice size screen, incredible amount of processing power. So, and of course GPS, among other sensors. So we said, hey, can we change the relationship that people have with their surroundings using these devices? So that was the core mission of the company, and you'll see that theme of kind of location-based games and user experiences that require movement be kind of a common theme throughout my presentation. So after the spin out around October 2015, we launched Pokemon Go, and we saw this happen. So this was a player-organized, what was called the Pokemon Go crawl. It was kind of a pub crawl mixed with location-based gaming, and thousands of people showed up. And this wasn't just in San Francisco, but it was all around the world, including in Sydney and just tons of places around the world. It was kind of happening simultaneously. So meanwhile, at Niantic headquarters, we were all pretty shocked and in awe. And it was just something that we were like totally not expecting and not really prepared for. But it was like amazing. It was like this moment of almost like a utopian, it didn't matter what gender, what class you're from, what ethnicity, or any demographics. It was Pokemon was this kind of common bond that people were sharing, and in the parks you would see hundreds of people, and somebody could just yell out Pokemon, and the whole park would just cheer. So it was this like really idealistic, like amazing experience that even the dev team were in awe of and very grateful for. We were just so glad that the players were responding in such a positive way. But of course, behind the scenes, this chart kind of gives you an idea of what was happening. So the orange line was kind of our best guess estimate of traffic expectations to our servers. The red line was the maximum that we kind of pinned and said, okay, this is the red line amount of traffic that we should worry about. So it was the estimated worst case scenario. The green line is what ended up happening. So you can imagine our poor server engineers who are working around the clock trying to keep the service alive. But we're still, just amazed and grateful at the world's response. So just a quick overview at Pokemon Go before we start talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff. So far, the app's been downloaded over 650 million times. And Pokemon Go players have collectively walked 8.7 billion kilometers as of December last year. So it's probably a higher figure. We just haven't done the number crunching yet. And in that same period, trainers, the Pokemon Go players have caught 88 billion Pokemon in that period. So when Pokemon Go first launched, the conversation was all about AR. The capture mechanic that we designed had utilized the smartphone's camera feature, and it was just piping the camera phone's video feed. And you guys are probably familiar with some of the game mechanics already, but for us, it was kind of an happy accident. I mean, at the time, AR was a topic, but not really to the mainstream. Like hardware like the Microsoft HoloLens was being talked about. Being part of Google earlier, we knew about things like Project Tango, and Magic Leap was starting to kind of make rumbles. So people, when you think of AR, most people thought of hardware, like some sort of like futuristic device that was still in the labs. But for Niantic, it was slightly different. Our founder, CEO, John, he always made the argument that AR was already here and it was already in our pockets. Part of it was the navigation experience like Google Maps. Was in a way, if you think about it, a map application is kind of giving you guidance in the real world and is taking you from point A to point B in a kind of a timely, concurrent basis through all of its computing capabilities and its sensors. So for us, even many years ago when we were working on this game Ingress, we were trying to solve the question of how do you get people to move. So if you're not familiar with Ingress, I thought I'd just play the trailer really quick to give you a sense of what we're going after.
What was the net effect of the Niantic project? We had crossed a threshold in which global security could be at risk. Decrypting the data was the mistake.
This is not psychosis or some cognitive break, but an actual takeover of the mind.
Much of the public sculpture found in our cities is based on design seeded in the human mind.
Certain places have an energy that not only attracts people, but attracts events.
The mission of 13 Magnus is to monitor the effects of mind hacking. Obviously, this will be done with the highest of security, to make sure that the ideas do not contaminate or threaten humanity.
This all leads to Niantic.
I know that many tools will be needed to fight this battle.
You just have to know where to look and know what you're seeing.
Portals emit exotic matter into our world, and that matter has certain effects on our world.
I started noticing that there were energy fields, anomalies on Earth all around me.
A few of them exhibit properties that are as yet unexplained.
I know that there are others out there.
What if they're already among us, but we don't realize it?
And I must be prepared to work with them or fight them. They are coming. something's wrong out there in the world. This doesn't feel like a scientific study.
The one hope lies in understanding what happened at Niantic.
Not all mysteries are solvable, but the joy comes in the pursuit.
So Ingress had this like thick layer of like conspiracy theory and science fiction, but it was really kind of an expression of Niantic's thoughts about augmented reality in 2011 kind of form. It was more of an alternate reality game where you have to actually physically move, and in like a Pac-Man kind of fashion, you kind of vacuum up these energy globules that are scattered all around the planet, and any game action required that energy, so you're constantly required to walk and move in the real world. And these locations weren't just like map-based, just random, the game wasn't just a game on a map. We actually spent an incredible amount of energy trying to build up a database of these point of interest locations where millions of players would submit interesting places that either had artistic or cultural or historical merit. So our goals are pretty modest initially with Ingress. All we wanted really was if we can change someone's habit. So take like a typical like office worker, and if we could change that person's habit during the commute route where they walked like an extra few blocks, we would have been totally happy, because we knew how hard it was to motivate someone to actually get off the chair and move due to some app or some game. What you're seeing on the screen is an image that somebody posted, and the image on the left is their normal commute route, the straight red line. And the image on the right is going to work while playing Ingress image. And you can see the person decided to walk in the park and stop by all these interesting points. So in a sense, we really started to feel like there's a ton of potential with real world location-based gaming. And the way we achieved this kind of change in behavior pattern was using all kinds of classic game mechanics like collection, game loops. There's a heavy dose of social interaction because you inevitably end up meeting other players when you play a real world game. And there's this emergent gameplay based on territory capture. So we considered Ingress already pretty successful in what we wanted to achieve. But then we started noticing that the social dynamics of the game was really just taking on a life of its own. So all around the world, every once in a while, thousands and thousands of players come together and duke it out all day in what's called like an Ingress anomaly. This event pictures from Cologne, but Tokyo, Seoul, Korea, all over the world, these events are happening right now. And as I mentioned, inevitably when you're playing these location-based games, you end up running into other players. You might battle it out all day long and then go for a drink afterwards, get to know each other better. So we started seeing Ingress marriages and Ingress babies, which is pretty awesome. And people were also losing weight playing our game. Because of all of our game requires you to walk, people were clocking tens of kilometers, in some cases hundreds of kilometers in distance walk just from playing this mobile app. So we actually ran a survey where 60% of our users reported having lost weight. So that was pretty awesome. And to give you an idea of how connected our players were to the game, what you're seeing on the screen are the faction logos. So Ingress has two teams, the blue team, Resistance, and the green team, Enlightened. And even when we're at beta, we started seeing this phenomenon which you never expected, which is people getting tattoos of our game icons. And Paul Martini, who's one of the designers, and we looked at each other and said, oh no, we can't ever change this logo again. And we were still in beta, so we were always like saying, oh yeah, we'll come back and polish the icons later. But so it was really amazing experience helping build Ingress. We learned a lot about how AR games how it has so much potential to change real world behavior of players, and in positive and meaningful ways. The social interaction component was greater than we ever imagined. Like I said earlier, the marriages, the countless Ingress babies, it was quite impressive. And then encouraging exploration. People were renting helicopters, airplanes, people are traveling across continents. Ingress players are pretty hardcore when it comes to exploration. And as part of that exploration, of course, physical exercise and increased activity. So these are all really interesting to us, and that's when we set out to build Pokemon Go. As you can see from this awesome concept art that Chris Dosky, one of our concept artists, created, we had a pretty clear idea of what we wanted out of Pokemon Go. It's not too hard to relate to this age-old archetype that you are the game's hero. Like, I don't want to be just twitching my fingers to control some external thing. I want to be the one slaying the dragon or fighting the aliens and moving about in the real world. So we kind of took that concept and tried to apply it to this amazing IP called Pokemon. And we wanted a more accessible version compared to Ingress. We wanted to appeal to a wider demographics, a wider age group, across gender. And so we made a lot of concept designs and try to move forward in building a greater sense of immersion, but we ran into a lot of challenges. And I want to kind of give you this definition of the term cognitive dissonance. And that cognitive dissonance is something that the design team at Niantic, the art team, we fought with a lot. So anytime your brain is like struggling to make sense of these two things that are clashing together, that's kind of cognitive dissonance. And for us, what that means is if you're out in the real world and let's say your screen is showing this beautiful snow mountain, but you're on a beach on a sunny day, that kind of separation of what you're being shown and where you're at physically, that is the cognitive dissonance that Team Niantic was struggling to solve. So in Ingress, we have these point of interest locations called portals. And as I told you earlier, we collected data all around the points all around the world, actually like 5 or 10 million points around the world. And they were player submitted with photos. So Eiffel Tower, for example, would have a screen like this. So we knew that being in front of Eiffel Tower, seeing Eiffel Tower, and on your phone seeing the photo of Eiffel Tower was this kind of way to connect the game to where you're standing. So that kind of immersion is something that we really wanted to repeat, but in a greater way in Pokemon Go. So at first we started looking at photospheres. So think like Google Street View, where it's like a static 360 view of a location. So we started looking at, is there a way to get a little bit fancier than Ingress, not just a photo, but something feeling a little bit more immersive. So we started just mocking up characters kind of in a photosphere. And we weren't quite sure if the camera technology on phones and all of this stuff was good enough to actually do the true AR that we always wanted from science fiction. So this was kind of a compromise approach that we started looking at first. But as you guys can guess, the photosphere introduces a lot of problems. If you just plop down a model on a static texture map sphere, and if that placement doesn't have any awareness of like where it is in the real perspective, depending on the height of where it's placed, like Pikachu can look like a giant monster, like Godzilla sized, or it can look like really tiny. And actually, one of the bigger issue was that a lot of the photosphere data tended to be car-centric. So when we wanted this walk-friendly gameplay to have lots of roads everywhere in the photosphere data wasn't compelling to us. So that's when we started prototyping, and we have this tech artist, a fellow named David Holland, who was a godsend. He's just started using his Unity skills to just try out ideas that we weren't quite sure about from just a tech point of view. We weren't sure if the mobile CPU and the GPU could handle kind of the augmented reality experience that we wanted. But the device limitations suddenly seemed surmountable when David came up with this. Oops, sorry. So this is his backyard at home. And this is the very first prototype of the capture mechanic using the camera. So it's pretty close to what we ended up launching with. But when the team saw this, you know, we're pretty much all in. And this is the battle mechanic that he prototyped. So he's sitting on the floor to kind of get himself a pretty good canvas to work with. So, you know, as you guys know, this is kind of a sleight of hand. It's not true awareness of the environment, so it's not true augmented reality in that sense. But the experience when we tested it out in our prototypes, it was just so compelling. You know, the team just really went all in launching with this. That sense of immersion and that connection to the actual location that you're standing in was really something special. So once that was sort of kind of locked in, we started looking at the map experience next, which is a very important part of location-based gaming. And the map has this kind of conflicting goal. And on one hand, it needs to function like a functional map application, a navigation application. So it has to just present information in a clear way. It has to show your bearings in a clear way. It needs to be like Google Maps. But on the other hand, it needs to be, you know, for Pokemon Go, it needs to be fun and needs to function as part of a game element. And like fun visuals tends to be a little bit harder to see. You know, if you have lots of VFX, for example, it can obscure those functional information. So when our team started looking at the map styles, on one extreme, we started at the very virtual end, like the pure functional, really clean map, kind of like what you see on the screen, and just highlighting the point of interest in a very pop kind of colors that are quite popping. And we kind of went further in that direction, and we started noticing that the map was starting to feel a little bit too cold. It was getting a little bit too far from the Pokemon IP. So then we pulled back. Our team started looking at, okay, well, is there a better kind of more natural texture that's still somewhat abstracted that doesn't cause too much of a cognitive dissonance? And this was another mock that Mika Hutchins, our concept artist, created. So when you start putting like trees and grass and birds that aren't really there, it starts to feel a little bit too much like the cognitive dissonance I was talking about. Like if you're in the middle of like, you know, 4th and Folsom intersection, and we paint this like lush vegetation, that's not quite the balance that we wanted to achieve. So we started kind of mixing the two extremes. This is an example of a little bit more of a mixed approach. And from here, our final map style kind of came about. So it is still very green, and the textures are lush to connect to the Pokemon IP, but things are pretty flat and abstracted and a little bit more vectorized to keep that level of cognitive dissonance from being too intrusive when you're walking about in the real world. So we were really happy with this look, and we started kind of wanting more immersion. So we started looking at, can we pipe the real world data, in a greater way into the map? So we started thinking about time of day. So even though we didn't end up having time to implement this kind of a more rich time of day based map experience can really connect the player to their surroundings, to their environment. And this is another example of what we were looking at. So Krystowski just kind of put together a quick mock of different time of day encounter scenes and plopped down the same Pikachu image. And our team is pretty small, so we had to be quite frugal with our resources and time. So we're like, hey, Pikachu doesn't look so bad daytime or nighttime. Let's just kind of get away with both. So that's where our scheme of the characters being lit the same, but the environment's changing, where that whole thing came from. So with the map time of day stuff figured out, we moved on to looking at the avatar. So avatar, of course, is a very important element of the player's experience in the game. It's kind of your representation of the identity. But the original direction that we looked at, we're worried about the same cognitive dissonance concept. We didn't want to kind of separate too much of who you are in the real world and what was happening on the map. So this is a really old mock. So we kind of went for this like intentionally separate, like, okay, let's not make the avatar too humanoid. Let's do like a hologram bust approach so that it still feels like a car navigation type thing where the direction heading is really clear, and you get to customize your character a little bit. But it wasn't quite cool looking at the end. We weren't that happy with kind of the chopped bust look. So we kind of went with a little bit more conventional approach with the avatar, but instead, even though our team was small, we kind of invested a lot of energy and effort into avatar customization so that players can customize the look. And on that note, actually, we needed to be pretty efficient with our tech art pipeline. Because of our small team, because of the mobile device limitations, we needed to kind of plan ahead how our UV texture maps were laid out. And these textures aren't actually full 3-color necessarily. We went with a technique called luminous map mapping, I guess, where the grayscale texture that you see on the left maps the range 0 to 256 values, but that grayscale gets mapped back to a color ramp. So the examples on the right, you can see that just by switching that 3K, 4K tiny ramp texture, we can get very different looks. And this was so that we use the data blobs very efficiently when you're even on a relatively slow network. And this also gave the art team ability to quickly iterate on the color swatches. So similar to the avatars, for the characters, the Pokemon characters themselves, we wanted to really nail that look. So even though the Pokemon IP has existed for 20 plus years, for Pokemon Go, we were given a lot of leeway and freedom to develop kind of our own look. And I really wanted the Pokemon characters on our game to feel like they were alive because of our real world connection, because we were trying to suspend that disbelief that these are just virtual characters. We spent a lot of time in the look dev. So again, Mika Hutchins, our concept artist, did these great set of like reference images where we went for a softer look. We used the Fresnel shader kind of look heavily with a healthy dose of rim lighting, because we knew that the image, the background of the characters, we weren't going to necessarily know the light direction. So we needed to just kind of have a amorphous kind of even lighting for our characters, and this kind of lighting scheme ended up working out great for the AR camera. And similar to the avatars, we needed to be efficient with how we were going to shade these guys. Mike Tun, one of our tech artists, did a great job coming up with a super efficient, mobile, device-friendly way to achieve that look using these BRDF shader texture lookup scheme, where the rim, top and bottom, and the diffuse and the ambient lights are controlled through a very efficiently packed texture. And also with the character animations, we used a UV offset scheme where we separated the UV, we used a UV space for masking the mesh, so that like 0 to 1, for example, would control the eye animation, and 1 to 2 would control the mouth. So what that allowed us to do was just use one draw pass to shade these characters very efficiently, and have and get rid of the need for having like separate textures for just masking. So it was a pretty efficient way to handle you know, these hundreds of characters that you're having to download while you're on the road. So with the immersive, you know, the avatar, the map, the immersive, the AR part is figured out. The next thing was to look at the interface, and we just needed to not get in the way of movement-based gaming. So in Ingress, back to this portal screen, we had a lot of shortcomings. So this was very precision tap-based kind of UI, and often the controls were precisely in the wrong place. So you had to reach to the upper right corner of the screen to get to the main game action menu. And the taps that were required for the main game actions also were like, it's almost like a web page navigation scheme. And I used to be a web guy, so I was applying past experience precisely in the wrong spots. So this was very movement unfriendly UI, I would say, I would admit. And with Pokemon Go, we wanted to change this for the better. So in Pokemon Go, you'll notice that it's a very thumb-friendly layout. We did our best to move all the core essential controls down to the bottom. And if you look at the diagram, that kind of center, like lower half of the screen where both the left thumb and the right thumb can reach, that's really where you want to kind of keep your controls at. And personally, I think swipe gestures on phones feel so satisfying, because while you're swiping, you have a pretty good grip on the phone. So even when you're walking and playing Niantic games, that grip on the phone is quite important. So you don't want to be doing like precision tapping like I said earlier. So in Pokemon Go, you can swipe to catch the characters, to throw the balls. You can swipe down to close various panels. You can open panels using the swipe gesture. So we try to use the swipe quite liberally. And the one-handed use was really important while we were playtesting. We found that any kind of two-handed play kind of killed the momentum of that game session. So unlike Ingress, we really tried to make the map experience one-hand friendly. So that's where the one thumb rotate kind of camera controls idea came from. And most game actions you can get away with just using one hand. And you know, if you live in a really cold country, last thing you want is to have to take both hands out in cold weather. And in terms of so that's where we ended up with the interaction design. It ended up appealing to a really wide array of demographics. Like my 70-plus-year-old mother is an avid high-level player, and this kind of Pokemon Pokestop interaction with the regular daily rhythm of the daily bonuses. Pokestops that change color to pink. It kind of acts as like a breadcrumb when you're walking and moving about. All these elements were designed to keep you moving and keep you motivated while playing in the real world. So with this achieved, we had a lot of surprising side benefits after we launched. We realized that people were using Pokemon Go to help fight anxiety. People were getting their marriages helped, I guess, and autism was also an aspect that apparently Pokemon Go players found beneficial effects. Like we were getting letters from parents who had autistic children, and they were like just thanking us that for the first time in a long time, their autistic children were be able to interact with others in a very healthy way when they were out in the park, for example. Everybody was welcoming them because they were all out there playing Pokemon Go together. So we got a lot of touching letters from all around the world. Along these lines. It was quite moving. And this was interesting too. Like there's a children's hospital that is using Pokemon Go for physical therapy. So because it requires real world movement.
Squat down. I can say, hey, the guy's a little bit lower. Can you reach down and get him? And that's just a really tricky way that physical therapy or occupational therapy can get a kid to do the exercises that he was screaming and crying about 5 minutes ago that he didn't want to do. This kind of raises the general atmosphere of happiness here. It's the technology that's only going to get better and going to be more exciting.
So yeah, the technology is only going to get better, and we're pretty excited about what's next. There's so many ideas that we wanted to build that we didn't have time for. What kind of ended up going out to the public was probably like 10% of all the ideas that Niantic dev members had. So for example, one of the things that we want to go back to is just continuing to increase the real world connection and the immersiveness with the player. So this kind of beautiful sunset type thing is just a small example of what we mocked up but didn't get to implement. Someday, hopefully, we'll get to do like more weather kind of effects. And the social aspect is something that we're continuing to look forward to. With Ingress, we already have this massive Ingress anomalies where, for example, in July of last year, we had 12,000 people gather in Tokyo to play Ingress together as a community. So these kind of epic events, we hope to be able to design features into Pokemon Go so that we can replicate this kind of amazing social experiences. And last but not least, hope we'll see more tattoos. And finally, I'd like to thank the small but scrappy design and art crew at Niantic. Paul, Mika, Chris, David, now Kaylin and Mako. They're just, I'm so lucky to work with these amazing, talented people. And we're hiring, so we're always looking, we're kind of in a growth spurt stage right now. It's a great time to join Niantic. We're still like a small, scrappy startup, but we have big dreams and we're hoping to achieve a lot. So Unity artists, 3D animators. And Niantic, we're building these platforms, these real-world location-based platforms so that game developers like you can take your amazing ideas and build a real-world version of X, whatever, insert game idea here, like that kind of concept, using Niantic's great location-based platform. So hope that in the future our paths will cross and we can see even more amazing things happen throughout the world. Thank you very much. So I left a little bit of time for questions in case any of you was curious about any of the material that I presented. So please come to the mic and let me know.
Hi there. So I'd just like to know, what's it like swimming in a Scrooge McDuck money pit?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What's it like swimming in a Scrooge McDuck money pit?
So the question was.
You don't have to answer that.
Yeah, we did end up with the overwhelming response from all around the world. Our revenue stream, is quite healthy, but. Our ambitions are also equally big. We're not looking ourselves as just like a small game shop, game studio, but we really want to build out this platform, and we want to continue kind of encouraging the healthy habits that we triggered with Pokemon Go and Ingress, where people are walking extra, spending more time with their family, with a shared game experience, enjoying their local surroundings. So we have big ambitions, so hopefully we can put those resources to good use.
Yes. I was wondering, early on you had a slide about changing player behavior, changing someone's route to work. I was curious if you could speak more about how big a change you were seeing from the average person and how long that would last. Was it permanent, or would they start kind of revert to their normal route after a while?
I think a lot of that depends on the person, and it still remains to be seen what the true potential is. Just to repeat the question was about what kind of player habit change, going more in detail into the types of player habit changes that we've seen. Ingress players so far have astounded us in how hardcore, how engaged they've been with the game. We've seen people just completely change their life around from being a sedentary, kind of a typical, techie to like a totally fit, like always going out to meet with Ingress players. Like a lot of communities, Ingress communities around the world have like these weekly gatherings where they'll meet at a local pub and then go on a group walk lasting many hours, where they'll kind of farm the game locations, the game board. We've seen people like go out to like really remote locations, like in Alaska. Like there's tales of their battle stories where they rented a plane and there's like a winter storm coming, and the pilot was like, "We gotta take off now," and the player wasn't getting GPS signals, so they're like, 5 more minutes and we have to leave now, and they like create these cross-continental links. So the extremes are definitely out there. With Pokemon Go, like I mentioned earlier, the billions of kilometers walked, that's definitely material distances that people are walking. The game dynamic elements that we're constantly thinking of, starting with egg hatching and the Pokestop colors changing, these breadcrumbs, and these rewards for walking. The game mechanic actually having rewards for walking is something that we'll keep doing. So I can only expect more of this in the future. Yes, please.
Hi. Thanks very much for the talk. When you talked about Ingress, you talked about how you had a lot of experience provoking these massive kind of rallies and real-world social events. When Pokemon Go came out, there was a rush of news stories about the sort of geography that you had layered over the real world, leading people to kind of run up against the difficult geography. of the actual world. So there were people finding bodies, or there was an issue with national parks in Milwaukee. There was I think there was a government in Southeast Asia that was worried that it might lead people to trespass into military bases. I was wondering how ready were you for that? How surprised were you by it? And how much planning and thinking did you do beforehand about what might happen when this was unleashed on the world?
Sure. So the question is how prepared or how much did we anticipate some of the side effects of having such a massive location-based game take off in terms of trespassing or unsafe areas. Having run Niantic, having run Ingress as part of the company, we did anticipate a lot of those issues, but in a much smaller scale. We didn't quite anticipate the explosion of player activity that Pokemon Go triggered, and we were making adjustments. You saw the game add speed limit detection, warning to players to make sure that they're paying attention to their surroundings. Those are really important changes, and we constantly continue to remind players about safety and the issues of location-based gaming. With governments, we actually have a pretty healthy relationship with like park operators or various authorities where we're kind of in a continuous dialogue about working together to make these experiences safer and better for the player community. So for example, in Japan, the local governments actually kind of coordinated with us, and they'll do these like Lapras, kind of spawning events to kind of move people throughout their cities where they wanted more like tourism or more community building kind of activities. So that's kind of a direction that we're really interested in going.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you for sharing. I was wondering, you spoke about Unity. Can you speak a little bit more about how you used Unity for the game? And was it real-time rendering, or you said that it really made a big difference? And I just want to explore that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, Unity. So the question is, how do we use Unity? Unity 3D is our main game engine. As many of you guys know, the cross-platform capabilities really helped us launch on both iOS and Android. And it just offers a lot of hooks for the artists to iterate quickly without too much engineering help. But having a healthy tech artist team, we found, was really important to act as that glue between more traditional artists and engineers. And yes, it is real-time graphics running on the phones, and Unity offers a lot of hooks to get at those sensors and the camera feed data and things like that. So it's been pretty indispensable for our projects. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm a bit curious about the philosophy behind the geographical distribution of spawns, because I think that if you live in downtown San Francisco, you have a very different opportunity to play the game than if you're like in a rural village in Kazakhstan or something.
Right. Yeah, and the devs at Niantic, we share that view. We really are desperately wanting more gameplay opportunities in rural areas. We're heavily reliant on player-submitted location data, for many reasons, player safety being one of them. We're starting, like in Ingress, for example, we have an online tool where players can submit and rate each other's location, photos and the description about that place, and how interesting is it culturally or artistically. So I'm optimistic that over time we'll be able to grow that database so that rural areas can also have a rich gameplay experience. Thanks.
Hello, I'm curious about why you launched with the gym system you did, as opposed to allowing players to battle their friends head-to-head in real time.
Yeah, we have a lot of game feature ideas that we want to continue building in the future, like PvP or a better tuned gym system. So the game loop is something that we're continuing to evolve. But initially, the rollout focused really on the collection mechanic and wanted to, test the waters and if there was something interesting here, and there was. So the dev team is really hard at work building out the game features. So I can say, yeah, please look forward to more fun, engaging game mechanics in the future.
Hi, I wanted to ask about, you talked a lot about the textures and how that was kept small. I was curious what the restrictions were on 3D models and the variety of complexities with character models of so many numbers in a game like that.
Yeah, luckily, so the question was about the complexities of the character data. And luckily, we had a great partner, the Pokemon Company and Creatures Inc. They gave us the base mesh data that we were able to massage and process in our pipeline from the original game series. I'm not quite sure which platform, maybe the DS games. So we had a good starting point. But of course, taking that to a smartphone, like Unity kind of model, it was quite difficult. So it just took a ton of effort writing smart tools to automate as much as possible and minimize manual tuning and things like that. But we were able to, Mike Tun and Kaylin, those guys were, the tech artists were really able to massage the data so that not just the vertex data, but the texture data came over pretty good. But it was still a very subjective thing for the look dev part. There was a lot of directions we could have gone in terms of shading the character. So our concept artists really had to go model by model and tune the AO layers or get the colors right. It was a pretty tough process, but we're getting better at it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. So you spoke a little bit about the iteration process for the player avatar models and the style design behind that. I noticed in some of the earlier concepts, there was more of an anime style, sort of in line with the original IP. Mm-hmm. Why did you guys choose to go for a slightly more realistic look for the avatar? Was that more immersion, sort of that AR?
Yeah, definitely. It was a very conscious decision on our part. We wanted to have a version of Pokemon that wasn't, so the original IP, the trainers have a much younger look, and the target audience tends to skew younger ages. But for us, the avatars, we wanted to kind of elevate them to an older generation slightly, and for that, lessening that cognitive dissonance that I mentioned earlier. We didn't want some super stylized, like big-headed but small-bodied kind of characters running around on a map when like you're the real game hero. We kind of wanted to match the virtual with the physical as much as possible. So in a way we achieved that. We're already seeing people like make their, kind of costumes to match what's in the game and kind of wear that while they're playing Pokemon Go. So that's kind of cute. And also and we're gonna try to push that further. We want, more hairstyles and more, hopefully more different ages that you can choose from, different skin colors. So we're hoping to push the envelope a little bit more there. Thanks. Hello.
Hi. You talked about the tattoos and how you could never ever change that again. How did you approach your design process? Did you think about things that you couldn't pull back on in terms of anchoring the community if you were afraid of that? Or do you release them and are open to pull back on certain designs?
Are you talking about the graphic design specifically or just designs generally?
Just designs in general, so gameplay as well.
Yeah, maybe because of Ingress and the whole tattoo kind of experience, we were a little bit more cognizant of what's possible out there. So the question was, did the team feel, or how did the team deal with the fact that once you put out something, it's like permanent, basically. So certainly with the faction symbols in Pokemon Go, Team Valor and Team Instinct, that kind of thing, we iterated quite a long time because the whole time the artist and I were going, these are going to be tattoos. Like, we know it's going to happen. So let's make sure that it works well as a tattoo. So we put in a lot of time and energy specifically on the graphic design. But you're right that generally the game got so much attention that anything that we put out was scrutinized and analyzed, and it was very natural to feel like once we put out something, it's like anchored and we can't change it ever again. But I think it's really important, especially with smartphone mobile games, that the devs kind of resist that impulse. Like it is this malleable thing where if something's not working well, you have to be able to go in and do the surgery to change it. So and that's kind of Niantic's like attitude about our current game loop. Like, we have a lot of ideas about how to improve certain things that aren't working so well, and emphasize things that are working well, like like hatching eggs, for example, really is motivating people to walk incredible distances. So that's something that we'll hold on to, but adjust some of the other game loop elements. So we're trying to stay flexible and stay on our toes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, hello.
Hello. What are some of the steps you guys took or techniques you employed to combat people cheating by spoofing their GPS location monitoring?
Yeah, so that's probably a great question for Ed, who's our engineering director. He's actually giving a talk, I think, later this week. But we have some really smart people working day and night trying to combat that. But my limited understanding of the situation is that a lot of the hardware, a lot of the phones, like if you kind of get underneath a certain OS level, then it's just really hard for the game operator to detect truly whether that phone's been hacked or not. So we have to use all kinds of other signals to combat cheating behavior. So it's an ongoing thing, but we have some really good people on it, and hopefully, there's not too much I can say on that topic. I'm sorry, I'm the art guy, so but thanks.
Hi. For the tracking part, did you consider using more powerful image-based algorithms for the tracking at some point? And if you did, why did you discard them?
Oh, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, like algorithms for image-based tracking, like the ones that they use the camera like to do the tracking for the phone, like, I don't know, SLAM or something like that. If you considered using them, and if you did, why you discarded them in the end?
Yeah, we're looking at so the question is about like image tracking technologies and what we considered. Our initial launch phase, we were targeting devices that were pretty old, and that's because we wanted that accessibility. So like our target device was, I think, a Nexus 4 on the Android side, and like an iPhone, a low-end iPhone. So that's like 2-3 generations back. So that kind of limited what we could really like do with the game. And because of the importance of that immersion and augmented reality to our titles, like we are heavily investing in various kind of AR technologies out there, and looking at solutions very carefully, and talking to partners and stuff like that. So we're pretty optimistic that AR is really has a bright future, even relative to VR. So that's where we'll keep taking a close look at.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm way over time, so maybe last couple of questions. Yes. Hi.
Your game is like very rooted in a lot of like pretty technical stuff. Can you talk about some of the challenges of working on a product that really had these like tech barriers that you had to cross to be able to create something?
Sorry, the tech barriers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main aspect regarding technical challenges for us was given how small our team was. I think when we spun out from Google, we were barely like 30 people. So you can imagine trying to tackle a project like Pokemon Go with a pretty small crew. So a lot of, at least from my side of things, a lot of the technical challenges had to do with how do you take very few people and just really maximize and amplify their contribution. So having tech artists who can write scripts and tools and Unity, widgets that, speeds up the artist was really crucial to where we ended up being able to get to. So like the character pipeline, I think we easily doubled the speed of the shading kind of tuning that was happening just from a few, days worth of tech artists like writing helper tools. So that was kind of the main example of some of the technical challenges that we had to solve on our side. And there were the optimization stuff that I mentioned already with the mobile data. We were cognizant of like other countries where mobile data is pretty expensive. So we tried our best to kind of minimize the data usage there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi.
Hey, I'll ask one last quick question. Yeah. So you guys have had a lot of really awesome positive impacts. I'm curious, are you guys thinking about developing, and maybe more as just a personal thing for you or Niantic, but are you trying to make games that are going to continue to do that? Or do you want to create games that create more communities? Are you focusing on health and fitness? Or, like some of the really incredible stuff about like marriages and things?
Sure. So the question is, will Niantic continue to build games that have like a positive social and world impact? Absolutely. We are talking to many IP or potential partners, and Niantic, we really do want to make our platform kind of the go-to place where game developers can take their amazing idea, like I said earlier, real-world version of something and kind of, build an amazing experience that we even haven't begun to imagine yet. So I think the potential is huge, and hopefully we'll continue to be able to execute on that.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a great talk.
Thank you very much.